Have you ever had your entire world flipped upside down before you even finish your first cup of coffee? I did. My name's Ethan Cole, and I was halfway through my morning brew, standing barefoot on my porch in Redwood Springs, Colorado, when I saw the bulldozer. At first, I thought maybe the city was doing utility work. You know, clearing out a drainage ditch or prepping for winter repairs. But then I spotted the construction crew, hard hats, clipboards, and fluorescent vests, all swarming like ants. And that's when I saw the banner. Giant, white, and flapping in the mountain wind, like it owned the sky. Future site of Crestwood Luxury Golf and Spa. I blinked. My coffee slipped right out of my hand, splattering across the wooden planks. My land. They were breaking ground on my land. But that didn't make any sense. I didn't own any vacant land, or so I thought. Heart pounding, slippers slapping against the pavement, I stormed across my yard toward the chaos, toward the sound of backhoes tearing into the earth. And right then I knew whatever was happening here, it wasn't just a mistake. It was something far worse. I didn't even make it halfway to the machinery before some guy in a neon vest barked at me without so much as a glance. We're on a tight schedule, buddy. Buddy. I wasn't his buddy. I was a man who was about to have a stroke on his own front lawn. This is my property. I shouted. You can't just... Sir, came a voice behind me. Smooth, polished, cold. I turned around, and there he was, tall, tan, and dressed like he'd taken a wrong turn on his way to a boardroom. A designer suit and a jawline sculpted by expensive genetics. Richard Prescott, he said, extending a hand like we were at a charity gala. CEO of Crestwood Developers. Pleasure to meet you. I didn't shake it. You're digging up my land. He smiled, the kind of smile that always hides a knife. Actually, we purchased this lot fair and square through the Homeowners Association, part of a rezoning initiative. I blinked. What land? I didn't sell anything. Prescott gave a tired sigh, like I was just another speed bump on his road to a ribbon cutting. He pulled a sleek black folder from under his arm, flipped it open, and held it out with the confidence of a magician performing his grand finale. Property 786B, previously under your name. Neglected, according to HOA reports. Sold legally at auction. It's all here. And sure enough, there was my name, my signature, on documents I had never seen before in my life. My mouth went dry. My knees didn't quite buckle, but they thought about it, because someone somehow had just stolen a piece of land I didn't even know I owned, and sold it to a billionaire. By the time I reached the Redwood Springs HOA office, I could feel my pulse pounding behind my eyes. The place smelled like burnt coffee and stale authority, a beige little building where bad decisions went to hide behind paperwork. I stormed in, slapped the fake property documents down on the table, and locked eyes with a woman who became the embodiment of every neighborhood power trip. Marcy Dunning, HOA president for going on 9 years, and somehow still smug enough to make my skin crawl. Well, she said, folding her hands like she was welcoming me into a spa. Ethan Cole, what a surprise. Here to finally pay your overdue fines. I leaned forward, voice sharp. You sold my land. Without my permission. She barely flinched. Correction. We sold abandoned property registered under your name due to unpaid fees. I don't own any land besides the house I live in. I shot back. Marcy leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a little smirk. That's not what our records show. You were notified months ago. I laughed, not out of humor, but the kind of disbelief that tastes like blood in your mouth. You mean the pile of junk mail about my grass being 2 inches too long, and how I can't hang wind chimes in October? That junk. One of the board members snorted. Marcy gave him a look, then turned her eyes back on me. The point is, Ethan, the sale was legal. Legal. That word echoed in my skull like a gunshot in a canyon. These people had sold a plot of land I never knew I owned, based on fees I never agreed to, using documents I never signed. And now a luxury golf course was being carved into the side of my world like it belonged there. I didn't knock over the chair when I left, but I did knock over their stack of monthly newsletters, which felt just as satisfying. Because if no one in that room was going to fix this, then I was going to burn the whole damn paper trail down myself. The county records office was a kind of place where hope went to die slowly, a waiting room filled with flickering fluorescents, peeling chairs, and the constant, muffled sound of someone arguing about zoning permits. I sat there for nearly 2 hours, clutching a scrap of paper with a parcel number written on it, my thoughts bouncing between fury and disbelief. When I finally got to front of the line, the woman behind the counter looked at me like I'd personally ruined her day just by existing. I need the title history for Property 786B. I said, sliding the information across. She sighed, punched a few keys, and then froze. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her brow furrowed. Sir? I think there's a mistake. No kidding, I muttered. What now? She slowly turned the screen toward me. The name field was blank. The ownership status? Unassigned. I blinked. What does that mean? It's federal property, she said, voice suddenly quiet. Federal? She nodded, clearly uncomfortable. I need to get my supervisor. 5 minutes later, I was in a back office with a man who looked like he hadn't smiled since 2004. He closed the door gently, sat across from me, and laced his fingers like he was bracing for impact. Mr. Cole, he began, do you have any idea what that land was used for? I shook my head. I didn't even know it existed until this morning. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. That lot was designated as a decommissioned military site. Technically, it shouldn't even appear on standard maps. I let out a laugh, short, bitter, hollow. So let me get this straight. The HOA sold land they didn't own to a developer, and it turns out it belonged to the federal government? He nodded. That appears to be the case. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. So now what? You just take it back? He didn't answer. He just picked up the phone, murmured something I couldn't hear, and 5 minutes later, federal agents walked through the door. My stomach dropped. Okay, hold on. I didn't do anything. The agent in front, a woman with a stare like granite, didn't blink. Where's the developer? I raised my hands. I don't know. Probably breaking ground right now. She turned her team. We need to shut it down. Now. And just like that, I went from annoyed homeowner to the guy standing at ground zero of the dumbest real estate disaster in American history. The next morning, I was still trying to convince myself it had all been some kind of weird dream until I heard the unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel. I peeked through the blinds, and my heart dropped straight into my gut. A line of black SUVs stretched across my driveway like a funeral procession, engines idling, windows tinted, men in suits stepping out with earpieces, and the kind of posture that says we don't knock twice. The neighbors? They were already peeking through their curtains, probably thinking I'd been running an underground casino or stockpiling fireworks. Before I could even grab a proper pair of pants, a firm knock rattled the door. When I opened it, she was standing there, the same agent from the records office. Dark suit, no smile, eyes like a winter storm. Ethan Cole? I swallowed. Depends. Am I in trouble? She didn't flinch. Agent Samantha Keller, Federal Investigations Unit. We need to talk. They stepped inside without waiting. I watched 3 agents fan out across my living room, pausing briefly to stare at my beat-up recliner and a coffee table buried in magazines and remote controls. It wasn't exactly the image of credibility. Agent Keller sat down, folded her hands, and said calmly, "We have a situation." "No kidding," I said. "Look, I didn't know the land belonged to the government. The HOA messed up. Big." She didn't blink. "Mr. Cole, do you have any idea what was on that land?" I hesitated. The guy at the records office said it was some kind of military site, but that's all I know. She glanced at one of the other agents. They exchanged a silent look. Then she leaned forward slightly. That property was designated as a classified decommissioned facility. No public records exist beyond outdated county files. I raised an eyebrow. Classified? So what are we talking about here? A Cold War bunker? Lost nukes? Aliens? One of the agents behind her shifted like he wanted to throw me through a window. Keller stayed stone-faced. "We can't disclose those details." Of course they couldn't. But the tension in that room, it told me everything. This wasn't just about a zoning mistake. It was about a place the government had tried to erase from the map, and now a billionaire with bulldozers was digging it back up. And I was the guy stuck in the middle of it all, wearing pajama pants and holding a half-empty mug. Agent Keller leaned in, her voice steady but sharper now, like each word had been weighed before it was spoken. The sale of that land wasn't just illegal, Mr. Cole. It created a national security risk. I blinked. And what now? If construction continues, there could be consequences, she said flatly. I sat back, heart climbing into my throat. Consequences like lawsuits? She didn't answer. Explosions? I asked, half joking. Still nothing. Just the slow blink of someone who had definitely read reports I didn't want to imagine. I rubbed my face with both hands. Okay, so what now? You guys just seize the land? Bulldoze the bulldozers. We're working on it, she said. But Crestwood Developers is fighting back. Their attorneys are arguing that the land was publicly auctioned, and they had no reason to believe it wasn't valid. I stared at her. Wait, are you telling me a real estate company is trying to outlawyer the federal government? It's more complicated than that, she admitted. Legal processes take time. Meanwhile, they've already broken ground. I stood up, pacing. So, while you're pushing paperwork, they might be unearthing something that was buried for a reason. Keller's jaw tightened, which is why we need your help. I froze mid-step. Me? What am I supposed to do? Sneak onto a construction site with a GoPro and a flashlight? You were listed as the previous owner, she said. If we can prove the HOA falsified documents or push the sale through despite red flags, we can shut it down much faster. I stared at her. You wanted to take down the HOA? Keller nodded. From the inside, any evidence, any discrepancies, anything that proves they knew what they were doing was illegal. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the fines, the threats, the notices for unapproved mailboxes and unauthorized porch chairs. I thought about Marcy Dunning's smug grin and her folder full of fabricated power. And I thought about how, for once, they might finally answer for it. All right, I said, slowly, let's bring them down. This time, I didn't storm into the HOA office. I walked in like I belonged there, calm, polite, clipboard in hand. The trick wasn't aggression. It was curiosity. People let their guard down when they think you're just trying to understand. Marcy Dunning looked up from her desk and gave me that trademark condescending smile, the kind that made you feel like she was already writing your obituary in Comic Sans. Ethan, she purred, twirling a pen between her fingers. Back so soon. I chuckled, light and easy. Yeah, you know me, just try to wrap my head around all this. It's not every day you find out you own land you've never seen. She leaned back, watching me closely. These things happen. That's why we follow protocol. Everything was done by the book. Of course, I nodded. I'm just curious. When exactly did the HOA get the authority to sell the property? There, a flicker. Barely a second of hesitation, but I caught it. It was classified as abandoned after years of unpaid dues, she said. That gave us legal grounds to put up for sale. Right, I said slowly. And you're certain that's legal? Absolutely. Because I heard something strange today, I continued, letting the words hang in the air. Something about the land actually being federal property, not just undeveloped, but restricted. Marcy's smile faltered. Her fingers tightened around that spinning pen. That's absurd, she said. We wouldn't sell anything without verifying ownership first. Oh, good, I said, tilting my head. Then you won't mind showing me those ownership verification documents? The room fell silent. One of the other board members shifted in their seat. Another coughed awkwardly. Well, Marcy said finally, those records aren't exactly public. Interesting, I replied, because if everything was done by the book, there shouldn't be a problem. Unless, of course, there's something you don't want people to see. Her jaw clenched. Ethan, this conversation is over. Sure, I said, standing up slowly. But you might want to know, the federal government is already involved. And if they find out you knowingly sold restricted land, I doubt the consequences will be limited to a couple of angry neighbors. Marcy paled. I turned and walked out, not with fire this time, but with certainty, because now I had her exactly where I needed her, and I wasn't alone anymore. I got home riding a wave of quiet satisfaction, right up until I saw the envelope waiting in my mailbox. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with a gold Crestwood Developers logo. It practically reeked of threat cologne. Inside, a cease and desist letter. Prescott's legal team, probably assembled from Ivy League nightmares and whisper warnings, was accusing me of defamation and interference with a lawful business transaction. Lawful? That was rich, considering the land in question technically didn't belong to anyone who'd signed a check. They weren't just pushing back. They were trying to scare me into silence, which meant one thing. They were scared. I tossed the letter onto my kitchen counter and exhaled. Richard Prescott wasn't just trying to bulldoze a hillside. He was trying to bulldoze me, personally, which meant I was more than a speed bump now. I was a problem. And if he was willing to send lawyers this fast, then Agent Keller had been right. We were running out of time, because Crestwood Developers hadn't stopped. If anything, construction was accelerating. And while the government battled out in court, backhoes were clawing at a site the feds had tried to bury. Figuratively, maybe literally, decades ago. I started digging. Old records, Cold War military archives, decommissioned site lists that had supposedly been reclassified. And the deeper I went, the more my stomach turned. This wasn't just some dusty weapons bunker. This was once a testing site. The kind of place the military didn't decommission, so much as quietly erase. No official closure dates. No cleanup records. Just silence. A black hole in public files. Which meant whatever was buried out there, it was still there. Untouched. Forgotten. Or worse, intentionally left behind. I called Agent Keller. "We need to stop them," I said. "Now." She didn't hesitate. "Send me everything. Now." I forwarded every document I had. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Her voice was lower this time. "Urgent. Get out of your house." "What? Why?" "Just go. Now, Ethan." Then she hung up. I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my keys, bolted out the door, and that's when I saw it. A black sedan parked 2 houses down. Windows tinted. Engine cold. Too still to be innocent. And the moment I started walking toward my car, the engine came to life. The engine growled low, like something was waking up that shouldn't be. I didn't wait to find out who was behind the wheel. I sprinted for my car, heart jackhammering against my ribs, threw it into gear, and peeled out of my driveway hard enough to rattle my teeth. The black sedan followed instantly. No hesitation. No turn signal. Just raw momentum. Whoever was driving wasn't some city zoning official. They were trained. They were calm. And they were staying tight to my bumper. Like this was a scene from a spy thriller. Except I hadn't read the script. I tore through the back roads of Redwood Springs, dodging potholes and neighborhood kids on scooters. My tires screamed through tight corners, but the sedan stuck to me like glue. I weaved through a red light, crossed 2 lanes, took a sharp right into downtown. Still there. Closer now. My phone buzzed. Agent Keller. I put it on speaker. "I'm being followed." Her voice dropped. "Is it the sedan?" "Yeah. Dark windows. No plates I can see. What the hell is going on?" "I told you Prescott's getting desperate. If he's sending people after you." A flash of red and blue up ahead cut her off. A police checkpoint. Sweet, blessed, red, white, and blue salvation. I didn't slow down. I floored toward the flashing lights, praying that whoever was chasing me wouldn't risk getting exposed. Behind me, the sedan's headlights flared, then vanished. Tires screeched. They turned hard, disappearing into a side street before the cops even waved me down. I pulled over, heart still galloping like a runaway horse. An officer approached, already annoyed. "Sir, do you have any idea how fast you were going?" I exhaled, hands on the wheel. Not exactly, but I was being followed. The officer frowned, glanced back the way I came. By who? I shook my head slowly. That's what I was hoping you could help me figure out. 10 minutes later, I wasn't on the side of the road anymore. I was in the back of a black SUV, being quietly escorted to a government facility. Agent Keller was already waiting. Her expression was unreadable. But the moment I walked in, she leaned forward across the table and said, "You just made things a lot more complicated." Agent Keller's jaw was tight, her eyes scanning me like I'd just brought a ticking bomb into the room. I threw up my hands. "You're the one who told me to leave the house." "I didn't think you'd lead a high-speed chase straight to law enforcement," she snapped. "Well, excuse me for choosing survival over subtlety." I shot back. She sighed. The kind of exhausted exhale that says you haven't slept in 2 days and your country might be about to fall into a sinkhole. Whoever was following you wasn't one of ours, which means Prescott is getting desperate. He knows something's wrong with that land, and he's willing to do anything to keep it quiet. "So what now?" I asked, still catching my breath. "You raid the site? Dig up whatever nightmare the military left buried under there." She leaned in. "We moved tonight." That evening, I stood on a hill above construction zone. The wind cut sharp through my jacket. Below, a swarm of unmarked vehicles moved in silence. Agents fanning out, equipment being hauled out like it was a rescue mission. The Crestwood crew? Gone. They cleared out in a hurry, leaving behind silent backhoes and half-dug trenches like the skeletons of a dream already crumbling. Then the earth gave way. A section of ground collapsed beneath a bulldozer track, revealing a massive, reinforced opening, a dark mouth yawning up at the world, lined with rusted metal and decades of silence. Agents surrounded it instantly. Flashlights flickered. Radios crackled. Orders flew. The mood shifted in seconds from methodical to urgent. Something was down there. I wasn't allowed near, but I saw Keller return minutes later. Her face? Stone. Her tone? Final. "It's done," she said. "That's it." I asked, "Just like that?" She nodded. "The site is under federal lockdown. Prescott's development rights have been revoked. The HOA will face charges for fraud and unlawful sale of government property. It's over." I didn't press. I could tell she wouldn't, or couldn't, say what they'd found. Classified. Always classified. A week later, the land was permanently sealed. Prescott? Gone. Quietly pulled his investors and vanished from the headlines. The lawsuit against me? Disappeared. Marcy Dunning? Resigned from the HOA for personal reasons, which was probably code for before the feds knock. Then, one night, I got a letter. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, "Some things are better left buried." I stared at it for a long while, then fed it to the fire. I didn't need to know what was under that ground. I just needed to know I got out before it reached the surface.